Hello, and welcome to Read Scholars Live. I am your host, Dr. Mary Fleming, and current president of Read Scholars. Today, I am joined by Andre Williams, who is a friend and colleague in the wealth management profession. He is the president and CEO of Pivotal Wealth Management. And we met a few years ago when I was trying to figure out my financial journey, and he has been very helpful in helping me transition through that period over the past few years. And one of the conversations that we had was about how our community as a whole, and our country probably in general, struggle with finances and financial literacy, and how Black and Brown communities in this country are often subject to the wealth gap. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today. So first, I would like to turn it over to Andre so he can introduce himself to us. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what led you to a career in finance.
All right, all right. Well, hello, everyone, and hello to my good friend, Mary. It's good to see you again, and thank you for the invitation to be on your show. I'm really excited. So where to start? So where am I from? I'm from where you're from. I'm from Kentucky, but the city that I'm from is where the winners reside, Lexington, Kentucky. Now the losers, Louisville.
Oh, you gonna come on my show and do this to me? I'm gonna take that friend part out of the introduction.
So I'm from Big Blue Nation. That's where I'm from, Big Blue Nation. But so in college, I was a business finance major, and just have always had a love for numbers and had an entrepreneurial spirit. And when I was young, I used to love reading Black Enterprise magazine and seeing all the successful business people. So that was kind of motivation. And coming to Atlanta, getting to see all the successful people, it was a good fit for me to get into the finance and money management piece of a career as a choice. And I've loved it. I love the fact that what I do makes an impact on people's lives, a direct impact. So I'm part teacher, part advisor, strategist, coach, all these different things with the intent of, at the end of the day, helping people to first delineate what their goals are, and then helping them set the path forward to meet those various goals, which could be the entire spectrum from retirement to saving money for down payment on a house, educating the kids, just building wealth in general. But, in my profession, what I do as an independent advisor is I've been trained to address all these various types of situations and helping people make sense of it and, develop a game plan.
So I think one of the things that a lot of us struggle with is this fear of money, right? So we always want to do the right thing. And I think a lot of us, when we get through with training, whatever our career path is, whether it's college or vocational training or whatever, whenever we decide to go out in the real world and get a job, and we're very purposeful about trying to do the right thing, but I think we're also very intimidated about trying to do the right thing because there's so much that we don't know. And I think the world of finance often makes it seem cumbersome and overwhelming. There's new vocabulary, and there's the stock market, and there's 401k plans, and there's overseas investments, and they start throwing all these words, and you look at the news and the tickers, and you're like, it's too much.
Right.
And so I think because it's overwhelming, people shy away from it. And then we end up in situations where we're not prepared, right? When things happen. So I thought we'd start a little bit around talking about financial literacy and what does that mean in your part of being a teacher? How do you help people become more comfortable with finances and money and not being overwhelmed or intimidated with it?
Well, I think the first thing is kind of what you touched on is to not use the jargon, right? So let's bring it down to, basic concepts, basic levels. Because first of all, doctors and medical professionals, you guys are already very smart. It's just that you haven't been exposed to this area. Right. A lot of us, Black and brown folks, from our upbringing, we have not been exposed very much to the stocks and bonds and mutual funds, et cetera, because we're trying to, pay the bills, go to work, get my check, pay the bills, make sure it ends meet. So there wasn't any surplus to really have a conversation around how you do investments in general. Now, some people have had exposure.
Right.
So if you didn't have that or you weren't raised around it, then how can you be expected to know it? And if it wasn't taught in school, whether it be K through 12, medical school, what have you, then again, you have not been exposed to it. So it is something that you could be intimidated by when somebody's trying to tell you what to do with your money, but you have no clue what they're talking about. So it comes back to bringing it down to the level that somebody can understand and kind of start with the basics. Sometimes it's really just the budget. So how much money do you have coming into your household? How much are you spending? What's going out? And maybe there's an imbalance with the budget as a starting point. And then we talk about debts, how much debt can be detrimental if you don't properly manage them. And then you just build on that, right? You're protecting the family with the insurance coverages, life insurance, looking at the benefits programs through your employer. And I kind of just walk people down a path. Here's what comes into your household. Here's what you have. Here's what you need because of the goals that you stated. So people get kind of comfortable and they say, oh, that's what that means. But it's not that you use the jargon. It's that you talk about the concepts first and then say, that concept is this, right? So you kind of can tie the words that are intimidating to a particular experience or concept, and people start to have the aha moment.
And so you mentioned in part of that a lot of this education doesn't happen, in typical education processes, but also specifically in Black and Brown communities, we have not had the education or necessarily the access to the resources that we would need in order to build wealth, right? And so we talk about going to work, grinding out, getting your paycheck, paying your bills, making sure the mortgage is paid, making sure the kids are taken care of. And we don't often have that access to save, to put away, to invest. And I think the other thing is that we don't have that generational wealth, right? We don't have parents who are often in the position, some of us are the first generation to go to college, first generation to be high income professionals, first generation to not be intimidated by finances and want to go out and try to be entrepreneurs, right? Most of our parents are going to encourage you to go get a nice stable job, go sit down somewhere, get your nice stable job, put your money in the bank in a little savings account, put your little 401k away, and that's it. And I think there are those of us who now, we have to do more than that. In order to build our communities back, we have to start making this money work for us and have exponential growth.
Correct.
And that's how we build generational wealth. And then that's how we can address the wealth gap to a degree. So we talked, when we were talking before, a little bit about income inequality, right? So we know in America, we don't all get paid the same. So white people get paid more than Black people, men get paid more than women. And so that feeds into it. But I think what really has made the difference in our communities is this generational divide. So talk to us a little bit more about how you see that and how we can address that going forward.
So when it comes to the wealth gap and how to address closing the gap, part of it is, like you mentioned, income inequality. So if you're just making ends meet, then it's difficult for you to have a surplus to do anything more than what you're already doing. However, there is a component of people that do have higher incomes and they're, simply making bad choices. And if your car note is $600, $700 a month, you're taking all these trips. I call it a YOLO mentality. You only live once. So we can justify all the expenditures that we're making for trips and timeshares and cars and, just all of this hyper consumerism, which is really harmful to the endeavor to build wealth, right? And do something different than the generation before. Right. And so, what we're on right now, Zoom. Everybody knows how much Zoom has exploded this year as far as its returns, right? So what I try to get people to understand is, listen, you can become an immediate business owner of various companies, successful companies, just by owning, say, stocks, right? But you have to have money that you're setting aside for the purposes of doing those investments to realize those gains and the growth of your wealth. So wealth is intentional. You have to make it a habit. The habits that you have on a daily basis have to be geared towards having a better future, a better future financially. You can't spend everything you earn. And I tell clients all the time, 15 to 20% of everything you earn is yours to keep, right? Which means not keep to go spend, but we're talking about the savings and investment component. And I think people get nervous and intimidated. They think that when you talk about saving and investing, it means that you're telling me I can't have something today, right? That's the fear. You're telling me to plan for a future date I might not see, and all this stuff starts, but you thought that 15 years ago, and here you are today. Right. And as you invested 15 years ago up till now, Amazon and Microsoft and companies like that, average annual returns have been between 32 and 34% annually, right? So you got to put money to work, but everybody wants to spend their money today and talk about how they want to retire at age 50, but they haven't done anything to put the wheels in motion to make that actually happen. So it's about being intentional, changing some of our behaviors, how we think and how we see money, being educated so you're not as fearful, and you can start to understand that risk is a part of the equation, yes, but you can mitigate the risk with appropriate portfolio allocations and so on and so forth. So that's how we really start to address that wealth gap. I think it's a mindset first and foremost. You can't spend everything you earn. Some people try to live a lifestyle that they have not grown into, okay? If you just came out of residency, let's say, and you got this 250, 300,000 a year, whatever you're earning, and you want to go out and buy the house and the cars, you're not ready for that if you got $300,000 of debt, credit cards, and so on and so forth. So you gotta really, I think financial planning is really a part of it, coupled with the education that can help assist with addressing and overcoming the wealth gap.
Wealth is intentional. I like that. And so, in speaking to finances and the economy this year, right? So COVID-19 has, we can't do a podcast this year without talking about COVID-19. It affects every part of our life.
Absolutely.
And so many people, have been economically challenged and even some devastated this year. And so, preparing for downturns is part of financial planning, right? So it's not just planning for the future, for retirement and for kids' college. It's also having that surplus so if you hit a rough spot, you can stay afloat.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about how you've been counseling your clients during this year when there's been so many unpredictable moments and twists and turns.
Yeah, so the big thing this year, the big word is cash flow management, okay? So you have to go back to looking at your budget, like every line item, all the expenses, your income. Many people's incomes have been impacted. Maybe you're not getting that bonus. Your comp structures totally changed. Your hours have been reduced. Any combination of things that have created an impact on your income. So if that's the case, then you got less income coming into the household, then we got to look at those expenses. Now, the travel for the summer, you probably weren't doing that, so there ought to be some savings there. You're not going out to eat, you're not, summertime, getaways and so on and so forth. But many people find other ways to spend that money. So maybe they can't go out shopping, but they'll go on Amazon. So the first thing is cash flow management to see where you can cut some costs, right? Just in case this pandemic is more prolonged than we initially planned for. You also, when we think about COVID-19 and possibly dying, right? You want to make sure that you have your estate in order, right? So you got young kids at home and you're the breadwinner of the household and you pass away, who's going to be the guardian for the kids, assuming, if you're not married, but is there adequate resources to make sure the family's going to be all right? Have you named your beneficiaries properly? Have you updated all of your documentation from 401ks to life insurance to investment accounts? Because maybe you were married and got a divorce and forgot to change the beneficiaries. So it's really important to have all of the legal documentation taken care of just in case something bad really does happen. But I really do talk to clients about cash reserves, and cash reserves in my mind, what I advise is 6 to 12 months living expenses. Sometimes you hear people say 3 months. That's nowhere near enough. 6 months is stretching it, but I like to get out to the 12 because of reasons like this. Right. If you have a downturn, you still got a mortgage, but the income is not what it used to be, you have coverage and you're not going to be stressed because COVID-19 is really stressing a lot of people out where, that $1,200 stimulus check, whereas I might say $1,200 isn't a whole lot of money, for some people, they need that to take care of the family, or it's something, it can be detrimental, which is unfortunate, but the lack of preparedness, situations like this expose those who are not prepared.
Right.
And so if you're in the midst of the pandemic today, well, you got to kind of take some emergency actions. But now coming out of it, I hope that people will learn a lesson and say, okay, this isn't going to happen to me again. I'm not going to be caught, unprepared going forward. So that's kind of some of the things: cash management, probably reevaluating all of your beneficiary paperwork, your allocations on your investment accounts, 401ks, brokerage accounts. Sometimes some of those investments you have might be a little bit too risky, and you need to sell certain positions. But at the same time, COVID-19 for the long-term investor has also created some great opportunities. So if you continue to be blessed to have the income that you had before, and you got surplus, if you started investing in some stocks, specifically back in March, you probably would have doubled your money on a lot of your positions. Okay, so it's all about balancing what your particular, looking at your scenario, your situation, and determining what the best path forward is based on your particular circumstances.
So there are probably some people watching or listening, and they're going to say, "What? This is a health equity podcast, right? Why are we talking about money?"
Yeah.
And I think it's important for me to kind of bring it back in that when we talk about health equity and we talk about social determinants of health and we talk about why health disparities exist, some of those exist because they have been such a vast difference in financial resources and communities of America, right?
Yes.
And we talked about the wealth gap earlier, and we don't have time to get into the history of America and why all of those things exist. But we know we live in a capitalist society, and we know that our economy is important to how things function and how resources are allocated. And as minority groups, marginalized groups, disadvantaged groups, if we don't participate in that economy, if we don't understand the rules to a capitalistic society, and we continue to operate in this oppressed arena, then that contributes to the continued health disparity. So we know that if people in impoverished communities are going to have more health disparities because they have less access to food, to transportation. They're going to have less economic resources for jobs and education, right? And so we have, it's more difficult to move ourselves out of those arenas without this type of education. So I just wanted to tie it back in to our listeners. I'm like, why are we going through all of these things? So, and that being said, I think for, anybody who's listening, who's like, I want to make my next best step forward. Like, and some of this is the individual level. So we're talking about some things that we're doing as an individual, knowing there's all of this systematic stuff that has to be done too. So that's a conversation for another day. But today, as a family, as an individual that wants to start doing their next best step for themselves and help to contribute to their family's generational wealth, what would you advise them to do?
The first thing is to sit down and assess what it is that you want. What do you want to have happen? That drives everything. And we talk about intentional. Well, when you say, I want to make sure that my kids, maybe when they get their start in life, they got something. Or when I pass away, I leave a legacy. Or I want to have, some sum of money by the time I want to be able to successfully retire, or whatever it is. You have to basically write that out. What's important to you. I'm gonna stop, going out with all these expensive hobbies that don't really bring a return on investment. I'm gonna cut back on those because now what's more important to me is X. So first is determine what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then you start to create the roadmap for achieving it. And if you don't necessarily know what to do, that's where financial advisors like myself can come in and assist to provide you with the resources, strategies that you would need to be able to, kind of bridge the gap between where you're at, where you want to be. And I'll also say with families, I think it's important, and I'm not trying to pitch any products or anything, but my father just passed away this month. My grandmother passed last year. life insurance is very, very key and critical to any family. If we talk about how our generations in the past didn't have anything to leave legacy-wise, that's one of the things I really promote for Black and brown community is have life insurance because that serves as an equalizer. So if you don't have a lot of assets, a lot of wealth that you can leave or pass on, assuming it's important to you, then level the playing field with getting the life insurance coverage. Nobody likes to pay premiums, of course, but it's not about the premiums. It's about what your loved ones and who you're protecting. But it's really about kind of creating that game plan. If you got expensive debt, that's probably one of the first things you really want to attack, because if that credit card has a 28%, 24% rate,
Don't do it.
that's expensive, and you have to address that. You have to knock that out. And if you got things that you're paying for, timeshares. I had a client that was paying $1,500 a month for a timeshare on the West Coast. She's a doctor on the East Coast, and she never went to the timeshare. What are we doing?
Yeah.
How much money are you losing out on that? So you got to kind of take inventory of financial inventory of where you're at today, and then start to develop that game plan to address what's the most critical components of your financial needs right now. One of those probably going to be cutting expensive debt, and then kind of saying, okay, I want to start putting some resources to work for me, putting my money to work for me, so I don't have these stresses. Because a few moments ago you were talking about health, and I firmly believe, and I'm pretty sure there's some research out there, medically speaking, that if you're stressed about finances, how many couples do we know that argue about that and they take that stuff to work with them? Or doctors that are older and they're still working because they have to, not because they want to. That can be stressful. So the way to come out of that is to begin to do something different and begin to game plan.
One of the things you just mentioned about family planning and planning for your children, and how do you transition into that. So just as a personal story, I think this is when I really first started thinking about it. But when I went to medical school, one of my classmates, her parents bought a house in Nashville, which she lived in and had several roommates. The roommates paid the parents' rent, so their mortgage was covered.
Right.
She had a place. I'm assuming it was free. I'll ask, but I'm assuming it was free. She had a free place to live, right?
Right.
When at the end of our 4 years, the parents sold the property for a profit, right? And so now I don't know what they, I'm not in their finance, know what they do with their money, but imagine if they then took that return on investment and allowed her to then buy a house with it, right? So that's how you get that exponential growth, right? Like you're planning ahead. And at the time I was like, I can't buy a house. Like that totally, over my head. I couldn't even think about that. But that's how people start to build the stepping stone. So instead of finishing school and trying to figure out how you're going to get a down payment, there are those who, here you go, and so now you're not paying off 28% credit cards. You're not paying off this debt because you got free money basically coming in the door. So that's what we have to retrain ourselves to be able to do, so that we can start to inch up. I mean, we're so far behind, but
we're so far behind, and it's really not that hard to do. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, today is as good a day to start as any.
Exactly. It's really not that hard to do, and I don't say that lightly. But one, you can't live beyond your means. Okay. So when you go out to get the mortgage or get the loan for a new house, the bank is going to try to give you the maximum loan. Maybe you don't need to take the maximum loan because you got some other things you need to take care of. When you go to get a car, you don't need to get the 2020, right? You need to maybe get a 2015, 16, or something more reasonable that allows you to not take all of your excess resources and put it towards somebody else's debt. I want all of our people to be financially free, wealthy and financially free. When you have financial freedom, I call it like financial nirvana. You don't have any debts or minimal debt. You got excess cash every month. You got a portfolio that's paying you every month that you can, I'm gonna take some dividends from my stocks or interest from my investments to pay for my trips, because you took your money. Your money's like a seed. You don't take the seeds and eat them, you plant them, and the seeds sprout and create what? More resources, right? But too many people and it's called opportunity cost. You got $1 today, and I choose to spend it and consume it. And we all have heard about how dollars don't turn over in our communities, but we gladly give it to the other communities. And we just lost the opportunity because had we taken that dollar and put it into certain investments, that dollar might have gone out and brought us back $3. Right? So the mindset again has to adjust. And when you talk about the real estate a moment ago, the most powerful thing that comes from that is teaching the next generation. We bought this house for you, we sold it, here's how we did it, and now you see the benefits of it. So you go out and duplicate this and make sure you teach your children. And I got to brag on you for a second because you've actually gotten into real estate and you leveraged some of the investments that we did. You had a cash value life insurance policy, and we talked about it some years ago that it can build cash value and you can take money out of it tax-free. What did you do? Leverage that opportunity, got some money tax-free to purchase another property, which is, you got several now, and those are income generating for you. You get depreciation expense that helps you to offset income, but that's wealth building. So you got real estate, stocks, business ownership. There's too many ways to make it happen. And I just want to expose more of our people to it and get them, to understand, stop being a hyper consumer and start owning something. Start putting money to work for yourself, you and your future and that of your family. We can do it. You just got to think differently.
Right. So with that, I don't want to hold you too long. And so I usually ask to close on an optimistic note. And I know, you've had a lot of loss this year, this month. And we talked about, we want to balance making good long-term decisions, but also knowing how to appreciate the present, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So tell us what you are optimistic about going forward as we are continuing to learn about ourselves and our country in the context of a global pandemic, and what do you look forward to as we hopefully get to the other side of this?
You know what? I look forward to the coming together of humanity. All the stuff that we see, the ugliness of America is on full display. And we can focus on that. But we can also think about how when we see those riots and the protesters, it's not just Black people anymore, right? So I'm hopeful that we continue the progress around love and the hatred and bitterness that some people display. I'm hoping that will, love is like the light that takes out the darkness. And I just pray for and hope for and wish for that day when, that ugly part of our country diminishes to a point to where it is no more, or it's so minute that, its relevance is no longer exists. But right now we're currently in a fight for that cause. And I hope everybody goes out and votes. But always try to keep in mind that hatred, people that hate you, you can't hate them back, because there's never going to be, we're never going to get ahead as a country, as a people. And but at the same time, within that microcosm, we have to look out for ourselves. And part of that is making sure that we are knowledgeable about how we ourselves can get ahead in this environment. So humanity and the growth of people in the country is a wish of mine.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I am hopeful for our humanity as well. And remember, wealth is intentional. So thank you so much. Take care. And I will see you soon, hopefully.
All right. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Read Scholars Live. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or subscribe to our YouTube channel.